Many things in our transition journeys can be tough, painful, or just flat out really suck. We may be tempted to repress or ignore these negative feelings and experiences, but as many of us probably know, doing that often just prolongs the pain in the long run. This is where something called mindful or radical acceptance can come into play. So what is mindful acceptance, also sometimes called radical acceptance? It's a term from a therapeutic approach known as dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. And if you're not familiar with it, your first reaction might be, why are you talking about shitty things and then telling us to just accept them? Thankfully, that's not what this concept is about. In simplest terms, radical acceptance is about fully acknowledging the reality of our current experience or current situation. Think of it this way. We have to first acknowledge and identify the problems in our lives, in our reality, in order to be able to address the problems. If we don't know what the problems are or are unwilling to acknowledge them, we cannot then address the problems. But it's really important to differentiate acceptance from things like approval. For example, let's say that someone misgenders me. Misgendering happened. That's the acceptance piece, just acknowledging this is what happened. But I also realize that misgendering fucking sucks. See, I'm acknowledging the reality, but I'm also not okay with that reality. Another way to look at this is radical acceptance is not about surrendering to our reality or being okay with that reality. Depending on the situation, we might be okay with it, but this is typically applied to tough situations to help us cope and get through them. In doing this, I'm allowing myself the space to acknowledge that I'm in pain in the moment. Because if I acknowledge that I was misgendered, that allows me to more easily acknowledge how shitty it feels to be misgendered, rather than trying to just deny the emotional experience or come up with an excuse as to what might have happened instead. Many of us have experienced many painful situations in our lives, and there will be painful situations in the future. Pain and emotional difficulty is a fact of life, and radical acceptance is a tool that helps us cope and move beyond the pain. But let's revisit the importance of acceptance in identifying problems. It's important to accept our current reality because rejecting it over and over does not change anything. Think of it this way. If I continued trying to ignore my gender dysphoria, would I have ever transitioned? Probably not. I would have likely remained in denial and continued to suffer. Radical acceptance is also applied to shorter, more specific situations, so I could think of each specific time that I experienced gender dysphoria. Again, like getting misgendered, or just experiencing body dysphoria related to my face or my voice or something like that. Acceptance is again not about condoning or approving of these experiences. Being able to accept that I am in pain allows me to accept that something is wrong here. And once I accept that something is wrong, something is just not right, I can start thinking of how I might act differently in order to decrease my pain and increase my happiness. Or in this case, decrease my dysphoria and increase my gender euphoria. In the case of misgendering, I may choose to call out this person. I may decide to not associate with this person anymore if it keeps happening. In the case of body dysphoria, I may try to find and focus on parts of my body that I do like, parts of my body that do give me gender euphoria rather than dysphoria, or find people that can affirm me in all of these things while I'm at it. We can't truly avoid pain. Trying to do so just prolongs the pain and suffering. Think of how repressing pain often causes it to bubble up more severely later on. In the case of things like gender dysphoria early in my transition, even before starting my transition, I had to finally accept that I was unhappy, that I was distressed, that I am not a man, that I was miserable trying to live a life that was not fully my own. I had to do all this before I could start that journey. I had to do this during those early stages of my journey in order to continue on my journey, in order to make those changes. Acceptance in tough situations can and often does feel awful. It's not meant to feel good. It can feel sad, it can feel frustrating, shameful, embarrassing, or a multitude of other unpleasant emotions. But we have to allow ourselves the space to feel in order to create the space to heal. It's like how we have to step outside of our comfort zone in order to grow. We can't wallow in the negative, uncomfortable experience to the point our lives become stagnant or overwhelming, but we have to find this middle ground where we allow ourselves to be like, okay, This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm feeling. This is my current situation, and I've been in this situation for a long time, so this might explain why I'm feeling this way. Now that I have a better understanding of what's happening and what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way, I'm better prepared to make changes, to at least try to improve my quality of life and try to improve my level of happiness. I was in pain for a long time, and I still have many painful days. But if I never moved beyond the thoughts of, this is unfair, it shouldn't be this way, why me, and so on, I would be stuck in a cycle of endless suffering. It's not to say I don't have those thoughts. It's not to say those thoughts don't come up still. But I'm much better equipped to be able to handle those thoughts because of all the steps I've taken to be myself and to find ways to address that pain. And like many things I've talked about on my channel, I want to emphasize that, again, this is so much easier said than done. This is a process. We are trapped in these cycles of pain and suffering often for years before we start transitioning. Some of you out there are probably still feeling trapped. And it's a lifelong process for many personal growth things because life is fucking tough. And we're likely to dip back into cycles of pain and suffering at least every now and again, regardless of how much growth we go through. Just because there are going to be people, there are going to be events in our lives that try to bring us down. So I just want to acknowledge that you're not alone on this journey. And there is nothing to be ashamed of if you are in pain. The shame feeds and prolongs the pain. Use the pain as a signal that something needs to change, not that something needs to be repressed. And sometimes there's not anything that needs to be fixed when we're in pain. The pain just tells us that we have needs that are not currently being met. It does not tell us that there's anything wrong with us. Also, know that it does get easier with time as we take more steps towards being ourselves and take more steps to really foster that growth. I could certainly go much deeper, but I'll go ahead and stop here for today. What are your reactions? How do things like mindful acceptance and even just self-acceptance show up in your life? When you're in emotional pain, whether it's related to being trans or something else entirely, what do you do to process the pain? What do you do to move beyond the pain? Is there anything that's keeping you feeling stuck in this painful cycle? I know this isn't the easiest thing to talk about, but sometimes talking about the painful things helps us move beyond them. Let me know all of this and more down in the comments below. And of course, as always, Tipsy and I love you all so very, very much, and we hope that you're staying safe and sound. If you have not done so already, please be sure to give this a huge thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and notification bell. I love you all. Bye for now.